Hey guys, before we get into this episode, I do want to acknowledge the audio for episode 4. I did the episode live on Instagram, and unfortunately, the actual recording just crapped right out. So what you're about to listen to is not necessarily up to my audio standards, but the content was so good, I had to share it anyway. So we'll be back to our regular sounding shows by episode 5, but for now, just dig in and listen to today's show. Well, I've been looking for an excuse to do a live taping of Permission to Leap as I just record it and then edit it and follow my process. And I thought, what better episode to start these live recordings than the one that I have planned about vulnerability? Because this one feels rather vulnerable. So I am just going to hit record. I'm going to do my thing. Welcome in to a live taping of Permission to Leap. I feel like we need to talk about vulnerability. And the reason is that because restarting this podcast, I have to be honest, is a bit of a vulnerable place for me to be. And I know that might be hard for you to understand or wrap your head around, right? I'm the one who spent more than half of her life sitting on a microphone. I am the one who spent a good portion of her career delivering the news and having to appear and be confident all the time, no matter what. And when I launched Permission to Leap last year, it was, I think, the end of September-ish when it came out. I had no expectations. I was completely detached from how it was going to change me, how it was going to change my business, and how it was going to change my life. I had just had a baby. And I was just figuring out what I wanted from my business and from my life. And I wrapped up the final episode in December, and it was called Permission to Rest. And then I took a year off, and I didn't intend to take a year off. I intended to come back sometime in Q1 with a whole new energy around the podcast. And it just wasn't in the cards for me. And that was really uncomfortable. And if I can be completely honest with you, that was the longest time I have ever gone in my life without doing some sort of podcast or radio project. I felt disconnected. And so stepping back into this arena, here we are in episode 4 of season 2, feels vulnerable. A little bit, it feels like I'm admitting that I made a mistake. And here I'm sitting, just like you, being a little bit confounded by what works in terms of content strategy, content flow, attracting clients, and a little bit confounded by what doesn't work. Because sometimes we follow all of the shoulds and the coulds and the rules, and we still feel like crap. And that's what happened to me. So today's episode, I want to dedicate to the concept of vulnerability. I want to dedicate it to unpacking what it is and what it isn't, and why, when you approach your content with true vulnerability, you will move the needle. You will move the needle. By the way, I'm Erin Trafford, digital entrepreneur, mentor, and strategist, and this show is all me, sharing my true-to-life, authentic, no BS approach to business building. I promise to share with you the reality of what it takes to turn an idea into a profit and a passion into a business. This is where we break down the creative art of storycraft, content creation, and showing up to activate your business from a place of strength and also a place of meaning. This is where we release the need for the shoulds and the coulds and the maybes. This is Permission to Leap. Okay, so I talked a lot off the top about authenticity and vulnerability. Actually, no, I didn't talk about authenticity. I talked about vulnerability. There, I just proved my own point. Because here is what I think. I think that for so long, as business owners, content creators, digital entrepreneurs, we have been fed this line that vulnerability is the same thing as authenticity. I mean, hands up, again, don't do it if you're driving. Don't put your hands up if you're driving. Just do that little like ding, ding, ding in the back of your head. If you have ever felt like to show up and get attention on social media, you need to be artificially vulnerable, or you need to share your dirty laundry or air your dirty laundry, right? We have been led to believe by these apps, Facebook, Instagram, I think TikTok, I'm not even on TikTok yet, that to be authentic necessarily means being vulnerable, and that to be vulnerable necessarily means playing with other people's emotions, making them feel sorry for us. And the reality is that that is a superficial concept, and it's a superficial emotional construct that doesn't actually move the needle. People will see you engaging in faux vulnerability and they will feel sorry for you, right? But let's peel back the layers. And this is what I do with my clients when we're looking at what stories really do you want to share. When somebody feels sorry for you, is that the energy you want them to bring into business with you? Is that the kind of emotional, empathetic connection that is really going to create a meaningful business relationship or professional relationship or client relationship? It's not. I'm not discounting that feeling sorry for someone is not a valid emotion. It is. But when you are using that as a trope, frankly, to pull business into you and to gain attention, you really need to think about that on a vibrational and frequency level. This is precisely why, I'll be honest, this is precisely why it took me almost a year, actually more than a year, for me to publicly admit what I was going through the end of 2020 and into 2021. I said, it was about 6 weeks ago now, that I admitted that I was diagnosed with postpartum traumatic stress disorder. I held that very close to me for the first year because I did not want to create an air of faux vulnerability in my business. I didn't want to generate the wrong kind of attention. Now, when it felt right, when it felt grounded, when it felt authentic for me to come out and say, hey, listen, this has been happening to me in the background, I got more messages that resonated with me and my business than I think I would have had I just come out and said it at the wrong time, right? So there's some sort of connection between vulnerability, showing up, authenticity, and timing, right? There's also that. So I want you to really think about when you are telling your stories, or you're talking about yourself, or you're talking about what's going on in your business, and you want to be vulnerable, do a gut check on what kind of emotion you are triggering on the other side, in the other person. Is it pity or is it kinship? Is it feeling sorry for you or is it activation, right? Is it creating a strong relationship in trust? Or again, is it creating this, oh, I'm so glad I'm not her kind of vibe? Look at that play between authenticity and vulnerability. And here's the other thing I want you to consider today, is that vulnerability, and we talk about this in a lot of my programs. I mean, this is part of the reason why I think Stories for a Year, which is my foundational program, is so different than other content strategy programs. And I know this because this week I have been meeting with the people who first bought into that program. When we very first launched it, I contacted them all and I said, can we hop on a call? I want to talk to you about this program and how it's working for you. And resoundingly, all of them have said that this program, yes, it's about content strategy. It's giving you prompts. It's got some strategic backbone to it. But what makes it different is that I am encouraging them to show up courageously and be vulnerable at the same time. That there is a link between being vulnerable and being courageous. And that when you are able to bridge that, your business will grow. And that's what I'm doing right now. I mean, I'm live on Instagram. I actually can't see because I'm looking at my scripting and I'm looking at my show notes right now. But I decided to go live and do this podcast right now, this recording that I'm doing on Instagram as well, because I knew I needed to be courageous and put this out there in a new way. Vulnerability is tied to courage. It's more tied to courage than it's tied to weakness. So if you're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, I can't possibly tell that story, it's going to seem weak. Ask yourself, is it actually going to feel courageous? Right? But then do that first gut check that I suggested, which is, are you actually going to activate the right emotion on the other side? Is that courageous act going to activate your business? Is it going to activate your clientele and bring them closer to you? It's all about the intention. It's all about the intention. And let me tell you, you know what? I'm going to tell you a real life story. I'm going to tell you something that sticks in my craw. This is not in my scripting plan, by the way. Besides the postpartum traumatic stress disorder that I was diagnosed with shortly after I gave birth to my second daughter, long story short, it was a totally normal pregnancy. I was healthy, everything was fine until the 20 minutes before she was born. And I'm like choking up just thinking about it. And we both almost lost our lives that day. But here's the other thing about me that if you're new to me, you may not know, is that before I had my first daughter in 2016, I was diagnosed with recurrent miscarriage. I couldn't stay pregnant. I was able to get pregnant, but I could not stay pregnant. And it was devastating. It was devastating. And I processed that diagnosis the best way I know how. I wrote about it. I wrote some award-winning blog posts and articles about the diagnosis and about how I was processing it. I talked about it publicly on television, radio. I was a spokesperson for fertility awareness for a while, but then I stopped talking about it because I had moved through that to the other side. I didn't want it to be my story anymore. And I don't often reference it anymore. A, because I've processed it and I've moved on. It's no longer really part of my identity. But B, because I think if I talk about it now too much, it becomes faux vulnerability because it is no longer a wound for me. It's a scar. I'm not talking from the wound. I'm talking from the scar. When I talk about my PTSD diagnosis, I'm talking from a very fresh wound, which is why it brings up physical manifestations of those emotions for me. But here's what I want to tell you. What drives me crazy, and I don't know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but my show, my rules, is that when I see people who flippantly mention miscarriage, and it's a vibrational thing. They may not intend to be flippant, but something in the way they are conveying that story in relation to their current reality, in relation to their audience, comes across as flippant and not courageous. It comes across as almost contrived. This is, look at me, I've experienced a deep loss. That's what I mean by vulnerability being tied to courageousness. That is what I mean by vulnerability not being the same as authenticity. That is what I mean when I said that to be vulnerable in your business means thinking about the emotion that is going to create in the other person and courageously stepping toward that at the right time. It's about timing, right? That is why I let that part of my story go. And now I'm working through other parts of my story. And here's the thing I want to leave you with today. And this is a fear for a lot of my clients. They'll come to me and they'll say, okay, I really want to activate my business and I want to stand in my own brilliance. And I have all these stories inside of me to tell and I just don't know how to get them out. And now is the time, Erin. Now is the time. Like if I had a nickel for every time somebody said that to me, I'd have a lot of nickels. But here's what I want you to know. And I really want you to know this. Whether you work with me or you work on your own or you work through one of my programs on your own, some stories you have are there just for you. They're just for you. And then you think, well, what purpose do they serve? The purpose that they serve, when you can put a name to them and uncover them and work through them, is that they help you develop self-awareness. They help you to see where your emotions lie. They help you to see where your values are. I recently worked with a private client, and I prompted her with a couple of my, really great prompt questions, and she came out with this story about her marriage. I mean, when you meet with me, it's a vault. I'm not going to tell you what she said. It doesn't matter what she said. It was one of the most emotional experiences I've ever had with a client. And she said, but how the hell do I tie that to my business? And I looked at her in the face and I said, you don't. That's not a story that needs to be told outwardly until and unless you feel the time is right. Until and unless that vulnerable moment creates courage in you to activate somebody else in a way that serves you both. But right now in this moment, all that you telling me that story is doing is reinforcing certain values that she has, certain emotions that she's connected to, that she wants to align with. It showed that she was able to put herself first, that she was a bit scrappy, that she was extremely resourceful. So we took some of those emotional themes and we laid those over her content strategy and found other ways to tap into those themes without talking about this deeply personal experience she had that really was not going to do anything for her business had we told that story publicly. So I want you to hear that some stories are going to be just for you. They're going to be just for you, but they're going to serve a purpose. They all serve a purpose. So that's my take on authenticity, vulnerability, being courageous, and holding stories close to you. Sometimes they're meant to come out. Sometimes they're meant to just be for you. This episode of Permission to Leap is brought to you by 77 Story Prompts, my free downloadable resource to help you unlock your story and start posting with purpose. Head to the link in the show notes or to erintrafford.com/77-story-prompts to pick up your copy now. How are people using these prompts? Well, you know me, however it feels right. Some of them are using it to craft compelling email content, others for podcast ideas and blog posts. And take it from me that these prompts are not your average prompts. They are designed to get you out of your should and in connection with your story. So you can head to the show notes now and download your copy of 77 Story Prompts. This has been Permission to Leap, a podcast produced by me, Erin Trafford, with the support of Eye Contact Productions and Story Studio Network. Music for this podcast is supplied by archesaudio.com. If you love the show, please consider leaving me a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts, because that goes a really long way to helping other people find the show. And don't forget to follow along on Instagram at its.erintrafford and tag me with your takeaways and thoughts. If you're interested in learning more about my programs and services at Erin Trafford Story and Strategy, or if you'd like to book me to speak at your event or be on your podcast, head to erintrafford.com or drop us an email at team@erintrafford.com. Thanks for listening. Until next episode.